unveiling history's most bizarre crimes. Imagine you're walking through the streets of 1920s Berlin. The city is still raw from World War I, and desperate times have created desperate people. But what if I told you that among the crowd was a man whose crimes were so horrifying that they've become the stuff of dark legend? It sounds like something from a nightmare, but for some people in post-war Berlin, the nightmare was all too real. 1. The Butcher of Berlin in the chaotic aftermath of World War I. Karl Großmann lived in the shadows of Berlin's Friedrichshain district. Born in 1863, he was already in his 50s when he began his most notorious crimes. To most, he seemed like just another struggling resident, but his neighbors sometimes heard screams coming from his apartment. In a city still reeling from war and poverty, those sounds were tragically easy to dismiss. Großmann had a dark history of violence and a predatory habit of luring destitute young women to his apartment with promises of food or work. Between 1918 and 1921, at least 20 women disappeared after encounters with him. Though some investigators suspect the true number could be as high as 50 or more. The horror began to unravel when dismembered bodies started washing up in Berlin's waterways. Finally, after neighbors heard piercing screams followed by an eerie silence, they summoned the courage to call the police. Officers burst into his apartment to find Großmann with the freshly murdered body of a young woman. He was arrested immediately, but the investigation revealed something even more grotesque. Blood evidence suggested multiple recent murders had taken place in that same room. Here's where fact blends with legend. During a time of extreme food shortages, rumors persist that Großmann operated as a black market meat seller. The most chilling allegation, one that has never been proven but refuses to die, is that he sold human flesh to unsuspecting customers at local markets. Before authorities could fully uncover the extent of his crimes, Karl Großmann hanged himself in his prison cell in 1922, taking his darkest secrets with him. What remains is a story that's part documented horror, part urban legend, and entirely unforgettable. 2. The Mad Bomber. Sometimes the most terrifying crimes aren't the bloodiest. They're the ones driven by obsession. For 16 long years, from 1940 to 1956, New York City lived under the shadow of a figure the press dubbed the Mad Bomber. This mysterious figure planted over 30 explosive devices throughout the city's most iconic locations: Grand Central Terminal, Radio City Music Hall, the New York Public Library, and Penn Station. The bomber's campaign wasn't random violence. It was a methodical vendetta against the Con Edison Utility Company. George Metesky believed he'd been wronged after suffering a workplace injury, and his grudge festered for nearly 2 decades. 22 of his bombs actually exploded, injuring 15 people, but miraculously, no one was killed. What makes this case truly remarkable is how it was solved. The 16-year manhunt became famous as one of the first successful uses of criminal psychological profiling. When investigators finally tracked down Metesky in 1957, they found a mild-mannered, polite man living with his sisters in Connecticut. His response when they knocked on his door? "I know why you fellows are here. You think I'm a mad bomber." He was declared mentally unfit for trial and spent the remainder of his life in a psychiatric institution. But his case changed criminal investigation forever. 3. I don't like Mondays. Some crimes defy all attempts at rational explanation. On Monday morning, January 29th, 1979, 16-year-old Brenda Spencer opened fire on Grover Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego from her house across the street. She killed the principal, Burton Ragg, and custodian Mike Sucher, and wounded 8 children and a police officer. During the tense 6-hour standoff that followed, a reporter managed to reach Spencer by phone and asked the question haunting everyone: why? Her answer was delivered with chilling casualness: "I don't like Mondays." This livens up the day. That senseless explanation shocked the world and inspired the boomtown Rats hit song, "I Don't Like Mondays." Spencer was tried as an adult, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder, and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of 2025, she remains incarcerated, having been denied parole multiple times. 4. The Angel of Death, what happens when the desire to be a hero becomes a deadly obsession. In the 1980s, Richard Angelo worked as a nurse in the intensive care unit of a Long Island hospital. A former Eagle Scout and volunteer firefighter, Angelo desperately wanted to be seen as competent and heroic by his colleagues. His twisted solution was horrifying in its logic. Angelo would inject patients with paralytic drugs like Pavulon and Anectine, causing them to go into respiratory distress. Then he would rush to save them, hoping to bask in the praise of his coworkers for his quick thinking and medical skills. The plan was as flawed as it was evil. Angelo wasn't always able to successfully revive his victims, and his hero complex ultimately led to multiple deaths. He was caught in November 1987 when a patient survived his injection and was able to identify him. Following his arrest, Angelo confessed to poisoning patients with the paralytic agents, leading authorities to exhume as many as 30 recently deceased patients to test for traces of these drugs. He was ultimately convicted for multiple murders, though the true number of his victims may never be known. At his sentencing, the judge told him, "You decided that you had the right to be God." 5. The Ghost in the Sky, some criminals are remembered for their brutality, others for their bizarre motives. But one man is remembered for simply vanishing into thin air. On November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man in a business suit calling himself Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. After ordering a bourbon and soda, Cooper calmly handed flight attendant Florence Schaffner a note claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase. When she seemed skeptical, he opened the case to show her what appeared to be dynamite. His demands were straightforward: $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes, to be delivered when the plane landed in Seattle. Remarkably cooperative, Cooper released all 36 passengers once his demands were met, then ordered the pilots to take off again toward Mexico City. But somewhere over the dense, stormy forests of southwestern Washington, Cooper did the unthinkable. He lowered the Boeing 727's aft stairs and jumped into the night with the ransom money strapped to his body. The FBI launched one of the longest-running investigations in its history, codenamed Norjack, but found almost nothing. The hijacker, who became known as D.B. Cooper due to an early media error, was never identified. The only trace ever discovered was in 1980, when a young boy found $5,800 in deteriorating $20 bills on a riverbank near the Columbia River. Did Cooper survive his jump into a thunderstorm wearing only a business suit? The FBI believes it's highly unlikely, but no body, parachute, or other evidence has ever been found. To this day, the D.B. Cooper case remains the only unsolved commercial aircraft hijacking in American history, a perfect crime that created an enduring legend. 6. The Art of the Steal, not all heists involve getaway cars and dramatic shootouts. The most audacious art theft in history began with a simple knock on the door. In the early morning hours of March 18, 1990, 2 men dressed as Boston police officers approached the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, claiming they were responding to a disturbance call. The security guard on duty broke protocol and buzzed them in. It was a fatal mistake. They weren't there to help, they were there to rob the place. The fake officers quickly overpowered the 2 guards, secured them in the basement with duct tape, and then had the museum to themselves for 81 minutes. What they did next was both methodical and baffling. They stole 13 priceless works of art, including Vermeer's The Concert, one of only 36 Vermeer paintings known to exist, and Rembrandt's only seascape, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. In an act of shocking vandalism, they cut the massive Rembrandt canvases directly from their frames. Yet they left behind other works that were arguably even more valuable. They also took an ancient Chinese beaker and a bronze eagle finial from a Napoleonic flag, while leaving the flag itself behind. The stolen art is valued at over $500 million, making it the largest property crime in world history. More than 34 years later, the case remains completely unsolved. No arrests have been made, no art has been recovered, and the FBI believes the original thieves are now dead. The museum still displays the empty, gilded frames where the masterpieces once hung, a haunting reminder of the loss and a symbol of hope for their return. A $10 million reward remains unclaimed. 7. Sweet justice from priceless masterpieces to breakfast condiments? It may sound absurd, but the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist was one of the most lucrative food thefts in modern history. Quebec produces roughly 75% of the world's maple syrup, and to control global prices, the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers maintains a strategic reserve of surplus syrup, essentially a Fort Knox for liquid gold. Between 2011 and 2012, a group of enterprising thieves targeted this very reserve in one of the most Canadian crimes imaginable. Over several months, they systematically stole nearly 3,000 tons of syrup worth approximately $18 million Canadian dollars. Their method was ingeniously simple. They rented warehouse space in the same facility as the reserve, then would secretly siphon syrup from the massive barrels, each weighing about 600 pounds when full. To cover their tracks, they refilled the empty barrels with water and returned them to the stacks, hoping inspectors wouldn't notice. The scheme unraveled when a routine inspector climbed onto what he thought was a full barrel for a better view, only to have it collapse under his weight because it contained only water. The investigation was massive, ultimately leading to the arrest of over a dozen people. The ringleader, Richard Vallières, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. While most of the liquid gold was eventually recovered, the sheer audacity of stealing a nation's strategic syrup supply makes this a uniquely sweet crime. These cases offer just a glimpse into the strange and unsettling world of criminal history. From urban legends to documented facts, each story reveals something different about human nature. Which case do you find most bizarre? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from history's dark side. These stories remind us that the human capacity for both evil and absurdity knows no bounds. The darkest chapters of history aren't always driven by simple greed or passion. Sometimes the motives are so strange, so twisted, or so bizarrely mundane that they're almost impossible to comprehend. It's a sobering reminder that truth can be far stranger than fiction, and that history's pages are filled not just with heroes and villains, but with the truly unforgettably bizarre.